and welcome to The Diplomat. Egypt has a rich culture spanning thousands of years. It was also one of the greatest and early civilizations the world has ever seen. Therefore, today on The Diplomat, we are going to sit down with the Egyptian ambassador to Korea, Hazem Fahmy, to talk about the past and present of this country, as well as the status of relationship between the two countries. Let's go inside and meet him.
Mr. President, it gives me the honor to present to you my credentials as Ambassador of Egypt to the Republic of Korea.
Hello, Ambassador.
Hello and welcome to the House of Egypt. Pleasure to meet you. How are you doing?
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for coming. And, as you can see here at the entrance, we have the Nile carved on the walls, as Egypt is the gift of the Nile. And we have some replicas of Egyptian kings and queens from the ancient civilization, and some of the goddesses and gods of ancient Egypt as well. And you can find on the wall some replicas from some of the paintings that has been on some of our ancient temples as well, symbolizing Egyptian heritage and the old civilization. Yeah.
The interior is very impressive.
Thank you.
It is like a museum.
We hope so. Thank you. Please come in. I think that's the date. It is associated with the pyramid that they keep on discovering all.
As we just talked about, Egypt is very famous for its ancient culture and history. But another thing that we can think about, which is associated with Egypt, is Arab Spring. Can you tell us what caused this pro-democracy big event movement?
Of course, there were several reasons that triggered this, and you can describe it in general as kind of a failure of governance. The main three cries the demonstrators have, which we could deduct from what were the main causes, was bread, freedom, and social justice. So there was a deep need, particularly among youth, to have ability to work, have jobs, and be able to have food on their table as a symbol of that. Also freedom, there were limitations on the amount of freedom people had, and social justice, because there was a huge rise in inequality within society, which also triggered all this anger from the demonstrators across the board. So these were the main drivers of the Arab Spring, as you call it. It was a call for change. There were genuine reasons for it and acceptable ones. It took several turns, not all of them were positive, and of course it had a drag on social and economic stability for a while.
Sure.
So people have mixed feelings about it, but in the end, it is a fact of life that there was a major failure in governance and changes were needed badly by the people, and that's what triggered the Arab Spring.
I see. So 7 years have passed since the Arab Spring. What is it like in Egypt right now? I mean, the political or cultural, economic, social status?
Yeah. I think there has been a sea of change. I mean, as I told you, the mixed feelings, the results of it, because as a direct outcome of this, of course, there was a major breakdown in security, and also the economy did very badly because tourism almost stopped totally, even production in factories and so on. So all this atmosphere led to a huge decline in growth and in GDP, which was very harsh for people. So immediately the task, after things settled down and new government was formed, a new president was elected, new parliament, new constitutions, there was a daunting task how to get things on the right path. So the government has been embarking on a very ambitious social and economic program, which has been yielding results quite fast. For example, growth was almost below 2% like 4 or 5 years ago. Now we are at 5.5%. There are so many infrastructure projects in areas that are very sensitive for people. There are massive build-up of new roads, new cities, and also new industrial capacities are being forged there. So there was also some painful economic measures that we had to take, including the devaluation of the currency. And for the first time in almost 40 years, we have seriously started to tackle the subsidy issue and to target the subsidies for the poor people who really need it, and not to have an umbrella of a safety net that everybody is covered, including the rich. So all this was very daring and challenging, but we are seeing incredibly positive results as investments are pouring in back, and the economy is picking up quite fast, and tourism is coming back strongly. So all these are very good signs that we are in a much better situation. Definitely, security is much more stable now. Socially, people are, of course, more calmer than before, and we are on a growth and development trajectory that is very positive and is keeping everybody excited about, and we hope it continues like that.
It sounds like the administration is managing the public's expectation very well.
I would say overall, yes. As I told you, there are some challenges, like you have to have some bitter medicine when you do a major devaluation or when you cut subsidies. These are some bitter medicine you have to take. But we are seeing very quick results for it. And also the administration is very fully aware of the issue of social justice. So they're also building very strong social safety nets for people so that they're not left out from the process. So I think, yes, the expectations are being managed quite well, in spite of, I told you, some of the bitterness with some strong medicine you have to take in order to pick up economically.
Right. Let's switch our topic. Today, the possibility of peace on the Korean Peninsula seems closer than ever before. And I understand that Egypt has been maintaining very friendly relationship with North Korea for a long time. What is the current status of your relationship between your country and North Korea?
Well, of course, our relationship with North Korea has a historical context. You know, in a certain period of our history, we were very much closer to what was called then the Eastern Bloc or the Socialist Bloc. So we were kind of forced into it. But in that context, we were very close to North Korea, like we were to the Soviet Union then, and so on. However, of course, the new dynamics happen and new changes go on. We have since then changed a lot. We ourselves have opened up our economy. We are more of a liberal economy now and more on the status of global standards of respect of democracy and human rights and so on. But also we have a very sensitive issue that's related to what's happening here. We are also a very adamant believers in having a nuclear-free Middle East, because we have one of the countries in our neighbors are a nuclear power or a de facto nuclear power in an illegal way, and we don't like that. So we can understand very well the sensitivities of what happened when North Korea started having the ballistic missiles exercises and the nuclear detonations and so on. And Egypt was a member of Security Council for 2 years, and all the resolutions that impose sanctions on North Korea, we did support them strongly in understanding and sympathy with South Korea and its situation. And as I said, it's quite similar to our regional situation as well. So I think we have much warmer relations now with South Korea. We have still a symbolic representation in North Korea, but I would not describe the relations as being as warm as they were in the past, and definitely we're much closer to the South. But given the new developments, we hope to see good progress and rapprochement between both North and South. And hopefully, as this evolves, we will not be talking about our relation with the North, with our relation with the South, but hopefully our relation with a peaceful, prosperous Korean peninsula with both its parties. And of course, I don't want to prejudge how the future will be, whether it be unification, economic integration, and so on. But we definitely think very positively about the recent developments. And our president gives so much credit to President Moon Jae-in. He was very visionary in the way he approached this. And nobody would have believed, I mean, the amount of work and thought he has covered. And of course, I came here for my position as ambassador to Korea on the 9th of December, 2017. Situation was just, I mean, on the brink of a world war.
Right.
And now we are talking a totally different ball game. And regardless of all the obstacles and challenges, we are still very positive, and we think these developments are to the good of the region and the world as a whole.
The leaders of South Korea and also Egypt held a summit meeting in New York, September, right after the third 2018 Inter-Korean Summit. What is Egypt's views about the process of peace on the Korean Peninsula?
As I mentioned, Egypt is very welcoming of these new developments and is very supportive of all the initiatives being taken to ease the tension in the Korean Peninsula. And we very much support all the efforts that President Moon Jae-in is pursuing in this regard. And we sincerely hope that this effort pays off quickly and in a good way for the people of Korea on the peninsula in both Koreas.
Then, apart from the peace process, what issues were discussed in the summit meeting?
As far as I know, there was a lot of bilateral issues were discussed. I mean, in the areas of education, attracting more Korean foreign investment, some military cooperation, and also our president reiterated his invitation for President Moon Jae-in to visit Egypt, and we hope that that happens sometime soon in the future as well.
I see. Egypt has been encouraging more Korean companies to invest in the country lately. Which areas do you see the greatest potential between our two countries?
Well, I think all areas that are in advanced technology, and we already have a few Korean companies working strongly in Egypt. Recently, Korea Telecom has partnered with an Egyptian private company called Giga Global Technology and Telecom, and they are going to transfer the Korean technology in terms of speeding up the internet in Egypt. Korea Telecom has a certain technology that could, most of our telephone network is an old one, so it's wire cables and it's resistant to internet. So there is some Korean technology that Korea Telecom has that could raise the speed up to 200%. And this by itself could raise our GDP between like 1% and 3%. So they have already signed that contract like kind of 2 weeks ago, and the president of Korea Telecom was in Egypt. So I think this is also a very promising area, all the areas of smart communications and telecommunications. They have also signed an agreement with our Suez Canal Economic Zone, which is like our own Hong Kong, which is much bigger than Hong Kong, but we hope it develops to be like Hong Kong. And they are going to handle all the logistics and the smart infrastructure for this area as well. So there are many prospects for that cooperation as well in terms of investments, and we really hope to see much more of this kind of investments. And as I said, the sky is the limit. And I think we are at the beginning, not at the peak of it.
It sounds like economic cooperation is growing and developing between our two countries. Could you tell us how Korean companies will benefit from investing in Egypt?
Well, there are two ways I could answer this question. First of all, the Egyptian domestic market. We are a country of 100 million people, so it's a huge market, which is, we have a large middle class and it's expanding as we grow. Also, Egypt every 4 years increases by 10 million people, so it gives you an idea about the market expansion. But equally important, if not more important, Egypt has a network of free trade areas with so many regions in the world that any company that invests in Egypt will have an access to a market of 1.8 billion people.
Wow.
We have a free trade area with the European Union, with the Arab countries, with EFTA, and most recently we have signed within Africa a blueprint for an Africa free trade area, which is going to be one of the largest in the world. And it should be materializing in a few years. So any company that has its strategy on expansion in global markets, as you know, 7 out of 10 countries in the world are in Africa and among the fastest growing economies. And Africa is the new frontier for emerging economies. And any company who wants to invest for that huge market that's going to be a single market through this free trade area will look for countries that have good infrastructure to service that market. And there's no better country in the continent than Egypt that has an infrastructure and a strategic location for that kind of marketing. So I think also as a third point that I might raise, given the current global situation, with the current global tensions between the two bigger powers, which Korea is linked to economically. If I was a Korean company, I would be looking for diversification. And I think Africa and Egypt in particular would be a very good destination within that kind of thinking. And I think now is the time to make the move before the single African market is totally formed. So once it is in full force, any company who's already inside there will reap a lot of benefits from that kind of investment and business. On top of that, I would like to add, even though we are a developing country, we have very good brains in our students. So I think any Korean company who has good research and development capacities and need fresh brains to be part of their process, I am sure, and I know that because we have so many Egyptian students here in Korean universities. Sometimes I attend their graduation, and all the universities I've been to, and some of them are among the best in the world, like KAIST, they tell me that those Egyptian students are very bright and they do contribute a lot to the research and development within those universities. So I think also that's another area that Korean companies and research and development centers could tap on as important resource in Egypt as well.
Korea and Egypt established our diplomatic ties in 1995. What is the current status of our economic cooperation status?
We have a trade balance between both of us, which is around 2.2 billion US dollars. But unfortunately, it's very lopsided towards the Korean side. Most of it is exports from Korea to Egypt. Also, we are starting to have a growing tie in terms of tourism. We used to have good tourism before the revolution, before 2011, and it dwindled because of the security situation. Now it's starting to pick up again. So I think this is one very important area. Korea exports like 27 million tourists a year. So I think Egypt should have at least 1 or 2 million from those, and we're very far from that figure.
Right.
But I do have very positive signs. I don't know if recently there has been, for the first time since 2011, 5 charters flights has been announced to Egypt in January and February from Korea to Egypt as a test for the tourist market. And we hope that that's a very big potential area also that we expect to offset a little bit this huge trade deficit that you're talking about.
Earlier, you briefly mentioned about FTA, but as a long-term goal, Korea aims to establish a free trade agreement with Egypt. What is your opinion?
My opinion in general that free trade areas do stimulate a lot of bilateral trade and investments, and I think it's a very healthy thing. You are much more advanced in many areas, so I think there are ways to have this free trade area with some asymmetrical commitments at the beginning till we catch up and we are free. But I think it's a very natural outcome to our relation and the natural climax for the evolution of our economic relation with South Korea, which we care a lot about and hope to nourish in the near future.
Which areas of cooperation do you see the greatest potential?
I think in areas of advanced technology which Korea have, we are also very conscious of having some endogenous capacity in our industrial production and technologies. And we think Korea is a very natural partner in that for many reasons. Partly because you are so advanced in these areas and you are very conscious of the technological trends. I know Korea is at the edge and the front of the fourth industrial revolution, and these are very important technologies that every country in the world will need. So as our partner, we would expect that this could be one very important area that we should work on. I think also education. A very important part of the Korean experience and success was based on a very successful educational system. We are now having a process of major reform of our educational system, and particularly we are trying to partner with world-class foreign universities, which you have so many of them here in Korea. So I think this is one extremely important potential area of cooperation, and economists called when you have this kind of relations, you have what a multiplier effects. I mean, all positive multipliers happen when you have that. So this is one area I'm really hoping that we have very strong bond on. We already have started some private universities, have contacted already, or some private investors, some Korean universities to establish branches in Egypt, and the process has just started, and we expect it to build up. And I think the outcome of this would be extremely positive on the dynamics of the relation between both our countries.
It sounds like technology and people together.
Exactly, and that's the best combination we both have. Yeah.
Then which areas or issues have you focusing on the most since you started your tenure?
Well, mainly, as I said, this educational part we are still thinking very seriously about and trying to do many things about. So this is one important area. And of course, as I mentioned, the issue of the transfer of technology and knowledge that Korea has to Egypt, whether through investments or joint ventures or simply buying of royalties. So we are trying so hard to connect Egyptian private sector with the Korean private companies and try to attract them also to come to Egypt, plus definitely tourism. I think this is an area which have a huge potential. And of course, with tourism comes the package of cultural exchange. I think we don't know a lot about each other, and we need to tap a lot on this and work hard for it. We have brought some Egyptian performers here, and the Korean embassy in Egypt did the same. But I think the sky's the limit of what we can do in this area as well. So the cultural tourism, technology, and investments, these are very important areas that I think we should work on very strongly in the near future.
I see. Last but not least, what are your goals as an Egyptian ambassador to South Korea?
My goal is to open as much arteries and channels between both our societies in all areas, tourism, technology, industry, and so on, because we have so much similarities, even though you're in a much more advanced stage as Korea. But you are a very natural partner for us because just very recently you have been a developing country, so you understand our problems more. And quite frankly, also, you have less constraints in opening up with us, unlike some of our traditional partners who have their own policies that are not necessarily very friendly in technology transfer or in opening up markets and so on. So I think Korea is a very important partner for us, and I hope as an ambassador, as I said, to open as much arteries and areas of exchange and create dynamics between both our societies in all these areas.
Ambassador, thank you very much for your time and sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you so much, my pleasure, and thank you for having me on your program.
It's going to be our first snow in Seoul today.
Oh, really?
The forecast says so.
Be as bad as last year, I suppose.
Even worse.
Are you serious?
That's what I heard.
Well, that's a big challenge.
But you live and work at the same.
Well, I can say it in 3 words. Facilitator, promoter, and communicator. You have to facilitate relations and connections. You have to promote your country and the country you're in. And finally, I think you have to be a good communicator in order to be effective in doing both these jobs.